Refresh, 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 refresh.
All right. I think we're
There,
good.
There we go.
isn't it letting me?
Is it
Oh,
showing up for you guys?
it's showing up, but there's no pause button.
Oh,
Okay,
pause button.
my cat is climbing my shoulder. That makes sense.
I usually just mute it so that I can see.
Right.
There, now the pause. It was so strange. The whole thing showed up, but no. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't even know how to explain it. Hello. I'm so glad we're here. We
Yes.
are on a bit of a neurodivergence process and path. We have Rachel Weathers here today, and so excited to get this conversation started with her. And then in a month from now, we are going to have Dr. Robert Jason Grant come.
Oh, he's so awesome.
I know, I really love
Yeah.
it. So I'm so excited to have both of you back to back so that people can really start to wrap their minds around the concepts, the considerations, the tools. I know in our initial talk, Rachel, when we were talking about, just getting things organized for today, that you had brought up a number of games that you have been using, and I know that excited Michael. So I'm just really excited to get going here. So what I would love for you to do, Rachel, is tell people just a little bit about you. You don't have to go through like a whole bio. Don't
Sure.
formal or anything, but
Sure.
I'm more familiar with some of the things that you do and you talk about and advocate for, and that is why I'm so excited to have you here. But some people listening might not be familiar, so let's hear a little bit about you.
Well, thanks. I am Rachel Weathers. I am in the Midwest. I'm actually right by where the Association of Play Therapy just had their conference, just south, about an hour. And I do all telehealth therapy, licensed in 3 states, actually, Missouri, Illinois, and Michigan, to be able to provide telehealth therapy working. I choose to work with ages 10 and older. When I used to have an office space, I loved my littles. I was a preschool teacher before I went back to school. So I miss them, but I feel like some people are more blessed with the energy needed to do telehealth with littles. So, but my specialty over the years has become, is definitely trauma focused. And I've gradually incorporated understanding a neurodivergent affirming lens a whole lot more the last couple of years, having ADHD myself, and just understanding that a lot of trauma therapies sometimes work a little bit different for some of us neurodivergent folks. Each of us a little bit different. But my background and what brought me into trauma work was that I had actually aged out of the state foster care system when I was 18. And so for a long time, I specialized in working with fosters and adoptees from foster care. And while I could advocate about that all day and some of the things that really, really need to change in one of the many broken systems of the world, right? I did gradually begin to shift into more neurodivergency with trauma work as I wasn't finding it very much around me. I was finding providers who, like me, were trained in things like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or IFS, internal family systems therapies, but didn't necessarily apply any kind of neurodivergent lens to adjust things, as both of those especially often use a lot of imagery work, which can sometimes be a little different in neurodivergency.
I think it's true. I wonder what your thoughts are. I don't want to lose my thought, so don't lose your thought. What you're going to say, but it seems to me that a lot of the general conversation, writings, trainings, conversation about anybody who fits under the neurodivergent umbrella, that the conversation is more about, let me see, I don't want to say this wrong or something, but more about specifically the neurodivergence, and not that these are people who can also have, and myself included, having ADHD myself. So not that people, even within that umbrella, can have many other things going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
somebody who has had, as you are saying, traumatic experiences, traumatic history, whatever needs to be processed and worked through, and all that within that arena, and need that to be looked at through whatever lens is best for that particular person, and how their brain processes information and experiences. But so often it's that's the main heading. And it's not acknowledging that people can have, I don't like the word in psychology, but comorbidity, that we can have. Oh my gosh. It's kind of like I've said, this is a little offshoot, but I've said so many times in my life, if somebody said, so for years, as a teenager, I worked in a home for the elderly. And some people who were in the home were wonderful. They were just sweet. They loved when I came in. I was a teenager, loved when I came in and talked with them and sat with them. We would have tea, whatever it would be. Tell me about their grandchildren, whatever. They're lonely, they're wonderful people. It was great. And then there were other people who were not. And some people, when I would say, wow, that person is just not nice. Oh, but they're old. It's like, okay, but you can be an old, not nice person. Both can exist at the same time. So if you think of that you can have all sorts of different things that any human can experience, and be neurodivergent, and have that be important in how we as therapists work with them.
Absolutely. I think also in the maybe not caught up yet neurodivergent affirming world, there's still quite a focus on fixing neurodivergency rather than acceptance of neurodivergency, and the fact that brains can work a little different from each other, right? And so I think sometimes that lens of we've got to fix this will circumvent and avoid addressing trauma at first, because it's so focused on repairing what was natural for that individual, right? Separate from the trauma.
I probably won't be alive long enough to see this, but my personal opinion, based on 30 plus years in this field, based on all sorts of research and trainings and all that kind of stuff, and then just my own logical process in my own head, is that I really think it's the other way around. I think there are so many more. I think neurodivergence is the primary. If we're looking at the normal bell curve, that's the 68%. I think the outliers are whatever it is that society thinks is neurotypical.
How is it that the 1 or 2% get so much power, right? In so many ways.
Over and over and over and over again. Yes, absolutely. I know, I was thinking that too. And then I'm like, okay, I'm not going off into that.
We can stop that one there.
Play Geek is in the audience, and so is Kate, all the way from Alaska. So I don't even know what time it is for her, but thank you guys for joining us. And Play Geek said, which is Fiona, of course, Rachel, you read my mind, was just about to type that. So yes, right on. So in all of that, and I want to give Michael a chance to talk, because I'm going to be quiet when you guys are in talking about all the games, because I'll probably be Googling them as you're speaking. Is how do you, through your lens, how do you approach digital play therapy in this, not just trauma informed and not just neurodivergence informed, but really through the lens of what the client needs, what they bring to the table, which is really a big focus of mine with digital play therapy, is what does the client need? What are they bringing into the session? And then how do you take from your theoretical foundation, from the interventions from what you know about your client and your own experience, how do you bring all that together to work with somebody in a way that can be most powerful for them? So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Really, it's so simple, isn't it? And I often think about how the first like 10 years of our experience as a therapist, we're trying all these new and different and unique interventions and theories, when really quite often it comes back down to what's simple. And it's often what the client brings to us, right? It's what they're interested in, it's where they come from, it's where their roots are, and the things that they love that gives easiest access to the things that they need to reprocess or the things they need to work on, right? And so when we can learn more about the games or the fandoms or the various things that they're into, and we can incorporate that in various ways. They love narrative therapy a lot. They don't necessarily use it as an exposure technique, more as a brain organizational memory aspect. But when we can incorporate things that people are already comfortable with, already have a sense of safety built with, right, then we are able to get down to deeper levels with them in the works that they do, right? And so to me, it comes back to, I'm a little over 15 years now into practicing, and it just gets so simple sometimes when it comes back to what does the client need? Like you said, what do they bring to the table? What are their strengths that they already own and might not realize, right? And how can we incorporate that in the difficulties that they came here with?
And what does it mean to them?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because we can, I remember being a probably odd child and student, and we were in a English class, English lit or something like that. I think it was a ninth grader. We were reading this poem. I believe it was Walt Whitman, and it was something about a rose, the rose, something like that. I'm pulling this out a long time ago, but anyway, I remember raising my hand because the teacher had said, "Here's the interpretation," and I said, "But isn't that individualistic? Like, isn't that something that each of us can determine what our interpretation?" And she shut me down, and I was like, I don't like that. And so here I am all these decades later saying it's open to interpretation for anybody.
Yeah.
And it's important for us as therapists to know what that means to and for them, because that's what it's about. At the end of the day, when they walk off from our office or from our care and we're done with whatever stint of treatment, that's the part that's going to mean the most for them to move forward in whatever they need to. So it's interesting to me when therapists are like, no, this is the way it is, or this is the way it has to be, or this is what whatever it might be. It's very confusing to me. I feel like I'm back in that class about the poem.
Well, needing to tell that teacher, right? what's what. But I will say I probably lean a lot into, like I had mentioned, narrative therapies, but also ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, which both really rely a lot on meaning making, right? And then understanding how the things we've experienced have come to affect us and what that means for us moving forward, right? And nobody gets to decide that for us, right? It is so individualistic. And we are the one that really has to sit with grieving some of our past and our loss the most,
So how long have you found value clinically, like direct clinical care, in utilizing digital tools in this?
Only about a year and a half. Well, maybe 2 years. So Fiona is a good friend of mine. We actually knew each other. We've known each other for quite a while, and she had delved in quite a few years ago. And I didn't give it much thought at first, which is so weird because my family, we're just a group of nerds. We go to Comic-Cons. We love, like, I couldn't even tell you the count of video game systems in our house. I can't even tell you the count I have in my office, because I got some of the extra overflow in here hooked up to my monitor. But we're just very accepting in our home of the things that interest us, that we can so often hyper focus on. And so I somehow stumbled on the tags the first tags conference as part of the geek therapy community. And it was affordable, no CEUs, but it was affordable. And I was like, I could probably learn more about how Fiona's using this in therapy, right? Let me tell you what, I walked away from that couple days of different people who had just taken their time to talk for like an hour on a different subject, incorporating fandoms and gaming and all kinds of stuff and how they use it in therapy. And my life was like turned upside down. I actually had left full-time private practice 2 years before. I was still doing it part-time. I was just really burned out with the pandemic and everything. And I was working for health insurance. And by the end of the month following that conference, my life was so turned upside down that I had put in my resignation with the health insurance company and I was ready to go back to full-time because I was already doing part-time telehealth before the pandemic. So that wasn't new to me. And I've incorporated fandom and talking about gaming before, just based on clients' interests and strengths and things like that. But actually delving in and incorporating it in sessions, only about 1.5 years now. So, but it's changed my life.
1.5 years. I mean, it's not an incredibly long period of time, but it's a good amount of time to be able to dive into it, like you're saying, to not only have the conversation and be open to it, but really understand what it means to them, why they're interested in the certain storylines. I mean, you're incorporating narrative therapy to that for sure. And we've
aligned so well.
On the stream, we've talked about so much of the backstory to different game franchises, and then even just individual games, like we've talked about a few of them on Roblox, like Piggy, and then of course you have the franchises like Zelda and all of that that have all these backstories and what that means to people as well, because I think there's an assumption a lot of times, particularly with video games, that it's very surface level, that it's very just like, I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to shoot stuff up, or I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to find things or whatever. And it isn't until you start to really explore and research more and play it more that you start to realize this has a lot of complexities. I know that, excuse me, there are people who have a lot of conversations about even archetypes and really specific interpretations and understandings of the components of the stories. The franchises that stick around and continue to have installments over decades, that's because they are speaking to components of the human experience.
Right.
We're talking about components of the human experience, then that is so important to incorporate into therapy.
So important. So important. And it really helps, I think, too, that like the moment I decided that this was for me, I had connections already established through, especially Fiona. Like the moment I mentioned to her that I was interested in it, man, I had stuff coming my way. She was willing to hang out and play some games together and be like, when I would be like, oh, well, it's just another form of play therapy. Right. And so much made sense. And so, and then I had quick access. Fiona reread through your initial book with me because I needed someone to help keep me accountable to get all the way through, and it just really was so helpful. And to find that there's already multiple books released, actually, I found on Amazon regarding incorporating digital tools into therapy, right? Especially gaming, like books that apply Pokemon specifically to therapy, different things. And so it's out there. It's just still this quiet, small, like voice, in the distance saying, I'm available, come my way, right? And so it's just been great. And then I actually ended up signing up under Dr. Grant, who will be on next time for further supervision, because I knew he really incorporated a lot of the digital tools in his work with kiddos, especially neurodivergent. And I thought that would really support a lot of the work that I was doing. And so I dove in, but I also dove into learning more, not just bringing in the things that I thought were fun,
Right. like Fiona just put in the chat, it's not willy-nilly. And,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I know I talk about that a
Yeah.
lot too, is like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
especially in terms of virtual reality.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just, oh yay, you're the cool one, you have virtual
Yep.
reality headset, or you have a Switch, or you have a
Mm-hmm.
PlayStation, or whatever it is that
Mm-hmm.
you have. There really is so much more to it.
There is.
And I'm happy that it's becoming more known
Yeah.
that that's there. And like you said, it's kind of
Yeah.
quiet. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm very quiet, but
Yeah.
it is a quiet movement that's happening, and the more people are going, oh wow, there is more to this.
I think
So
especially in the play therapy world.
yeah,
Just working against so many of the well-known perspectives that have, kind of thrown sometimes things like anime or fandoms or gaming, electronics under the bus. We're also a very electronically open household because we've got multiple of us working all day long with electronics, and even in management. And so we know that the world's only moving forward in the electronic world, and that's how we are communicating, right? And so
two things came up, and then I'm going to stop talking because I want Michael to jump in here. But two things came up, and one is that as far as the electronics open to electronics household, Dr. Grant and I actually spoke at a conference a couple of years ago, the World Autism Congress. We did a presentation there, and then we also had a booth and answered a lot of people's questions and whatnot. And it was such a different environment and experience than some that I have had in the play therapy. Yeah, absolutely. And the value of the things that we are talking about here today were really being talked about and understood, and it's a positive. And then the other thing I want to say is that one of the things Michael and I talk about all the time and joke that we're going to get tattooed on our foreheads is just another tool. Like I get confused quite often, and I shouldn't, I guess, but I still do after all this time, of why it has to be an either or. And to me, it's an and. Like the fundamental theoretical foundations that people have and understand and utilize, those apply. Like it's not something that has to be against. It's something that is really a with, because digital play therapy is a modality. It's not a theoretical foundation. You apply and ascribe your foundation that you already have to it. And I think there's a lot of confusion in there about that. So
agree.
Kate in the chat said, because we were talking, it's like quiet undertones going on. She said it's gathering speed though. So yeah, some excitement in there. So all right, I'm officially going to shut myself up, and I'm going to let Michael talk, because otherwise
I loved it. I mean, I just love being able to soak in the information that you guys are sharing, and it really is true. I love that both of you were speaking to the idea, when I think of a client coming in and being drawn to something, whether it's traditional or digital tools, that's the medium in which they need to express what they're feeling. And so for me, it's like depending, it doesn't, like, you would think from more of a, I guess, not clinical mindset, that like some of the things, if you just look at it from the outside, maybe you have a child who's struggling with social skills, and that's neurodivergent, and is on the spectrum, and struggling, and they're having just a difficult time making friends, and they're coming in and they want to play Super Smash Brothers. And so from like an outside perspective, people are thinking like, oh my god, what, like they already have a hard time, they struggle with their anger making friends, and now you want to have them play Super Smash Brothers, what is this? And so if you don't have that understanding, to really sit back and think, okay, what is it that they need to work out? They need to be able to work out and have a safe environment, to get this instant feedback, to be super angry and understand that the other person's not going to react very well. Like they need these environments to experience the whole wide range of emotions, to be able to learn and understand how they go about things and how they're going to make friends. And but to an outsider, like I said, they're going to look and say, Super Smash Brothers, someone who has a hard time making friends and has a lot of anger. It's like, so I'm a strong believer in, what you
Mm-hmm.
guys are saying, where it's like you will be drawn to, what is going to help you express what you're feeling. And a lot of it is very narrative driven. A lot of it is very like what Jess was saying. You look at all the, comics and, just franchises, Marvel, X-Men, it all is vastly centered around, someone who's trying to become a hero, was once a hero and had
Mm-hmm.
adversity and, struggling with inner, demons or external demons. And the idea is why wouldn't we also utilize that in a safe environment that we feel comfortable and feel it's appropriate? Because a lot of things can come down to a kid needing to feel a sense of control or mastery over their own life and being able to, have those decisions and, affect the way that things are going on within, the digital world that they're playing in, has
Yeah.
no actual implications on the physical world around them. Why wouldn't we be
Right.
wanting to utilize that if that is their way of, wanting to speak? And, I think lastly too, thinking about, um, Jess saying that there is always this like, why is it there's this or approach as opposed to and approach? And I think a lot of that is just a couple things. I think one, people really struggle with just the idea that there is an additional way to do things. And so naturally,
Sure.
sometimes that makes us feel like maybe what we've been doing isn't working. And that can be a very vulnerable feeling. So therefore, our controlling anxiety comes out.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I feel too much of our society is so like tribalistic. When you look at everything, sports, politics, everything, it's never, you know, this and this, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
taking kind of like that moderate approach. It's always like, it's my way or the highway. And, I hope that we can start to move away from that in all kinds of things in life and focus on just like you said, society and the world is going to keep moving forward. And how do we make it a better place?
Sure. Absolutely. And I just also want to throw in there that Super Smash Brothers has amazing opportunity for executive function skill
Oh,
building.
yeah.
Most of the kids that I play that with, and that one's a popular one actually, with my neurodivergent kiddos, are way better than I am at remembering all the different moves. Um, yeah, yeah. I would actually, one of the things that I like to throw out there sometimes too is I dare almost anyone to give me a video game that doesn't incorporate executive functioning in some way,
Right.
shape, or another, the skills needed that quite often neurodivergent individuals struggle with, um, while being within a safe realm of something that they're comfortable with, right? They can work on some of those skills. Um, and I find myself quite often with my ADHD not always doing so great, but sometimes like when the kids do better than us, they're also building that sense of capability, right? That if I can do this, maybe I can handle some of the things in my world too,
Oh yeah, that's a
right?
big point because I mean I've
Yeah.
even had that. I know I've jokingly told Jess before that in one of my cognitive science in my bachelor's degree, I
Mhm.
remember I have played games forever since I was like
Yeah.
12, and at this point when I was in this course I was 21 or yeah about 21 somewhere around there, and I remember memorizing everything. He's total old school. He would just write things down on the board, like didn't do PowerPoint, everything. Super loved him, great guy, but we
Mhm.
had to memorize, just everything on white,
Yeah.
line paper notes and everything. And I would wake up and memorize everything and, go take the test. And I would draw the models, like the box models. I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just trying to show I would draw them out perfectly. And he came to me one time and was like, okay, did you cheat? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, how did you like memorize everything and draw the models the exact same way that I did? The only way that could be possible is if you had something that was around to look at it. And I'm like, no, I didn't. And I was like, in fact, I'll draw it for you right now, and you're standing here right in front of me. And he's like, how did you do that? And I was like, dude, since I was 12 all the way up until this, about 9 years, I've been having to memorize all kinds of different timers related to people's abilities, the monster's abilities, my own abilities, like all kinds of things. Like this is coming in 35, this is coming in 7. Everybody get out before you're all about to hit, big old fireball that's going to take all of us out. this simple like 9 box model thing that you want me to write about how our brain recalls memories, like this is a joke to me, no disrespect. And he was just like, huh, I never really thought of it. So and that's involved in everything, even a game that's not even involving others, like, like Jess was saying, harvesting resources. Okay, what was that recipe that I had to get? I need to get X, Y, and Z. All of that stuff translates to, your physical world, right? Like
Yeah.
your everyday life and school and work and everything. So I
Yeah.
agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then you also have the aspect that we appreciate so much, I think, in play therapy, where you can project what's going on. And I can handle it by watching, for example, one of my favorite games that I streamed for a while on Twitch was Gris. I don't know if either of you have played it, but it is so beautiful. And there's a wonderful article written by a friend of mine regarding applying it to the stages of grief. But I also think it applies well to trauma. And so often when we've experienced hard things, it's hard to sit with them, right? It's vulnerable, it's difficult. And we've had our guard up for so long sometimes by the time we come to therapy that it's hard to bring that down and get vulnerable. And sometimes it's easier to do it through this projected character who's exploring and experiencing things. And we're able to walk those steps along with them, right? Gris is beautiful for those out there that haven't played it. It's just gorgeous in its art style. It's a single player, basically RPG, designed, I think, more around grief, as it's called Gris. But I think it fantastically mirrors the trauma process as well. We so often grieve in the trauma process, but also sometimes even depression. I think it fits really well with that area. But that, again, that projection, being able to explore that through this character feels safer quite often, especially in the early stages of exploring, than it can be looking directly at ourselves.
I put a link to it in the chat.
Awesome.
And then also a
Awesome.
little description.
Yeah.
Who is the person who wrote the article that you're talking about? And I'll try to find that.
Hold on. Names are the worst for me, and okay. I feel so bad that I forgotten it.
Don't even worry about it.
It's Gian Ramos.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember if it's shared on his own stuff or it might have been shared on Buntarika's blog, but it's beautifully done and he broke it down. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about, just games in general is always like the unintended benefits that we get from things, when you're looking at, a lot of these games. And it's like, I'm sure, Rachel, you've heard, but there's always the meme about, Mario, where it's like, how is the princess always getting captured and we have to go and get her again from Bowser? Like, this is, the same plot every single game. And if you really think about it, so is life. I mean, like when we feel that we've accomplished something, in life and we're good, something can, just unexpectedly come out, or there's a new adversity, or there's a new challenge to tackle, and I love making those connections for, the kids I work with, the families I work with, and then just the simple things that you wouldn't ever really think of, initially when you're pulling out a thing. But anytime you're playing a level and you fail, that's frustration. How do you work through that? You're building resiliency, and then just the idea that you're learning this never give up mentality, which can make you stubborn in some situations, but in a lot of ways it teaches you so much, like you said, executive functioning skills, and also just that emotional regulation. And just there's so many things that are related to there. And I even think that even plays a part in a lot of grief stuff as well.
Absolutely.
The idea that you can learn that a certain character will pass away, or if you die yourself, like you always know that it can be difficult. It's hard to sit with that feeling, but you get another shot, you get another chance, you build yourself back up, you reflect on what went wrong, or in the case of grief, what you loved about that, and you create that new normal for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just coming from a trauma perspective too, is so often I see so many who grew up in traumatic environments don't build some of that resiliency to have some distress tolerance skills, right? And while I don't necessarily always teach direct distress tolerance skills, because I think that they build when we have hope that things can get better, as part of that resilience, so much of video gaming requires it, right? And it feels safer to feel it there, right? And so just that feeling of learning that things can get better potentially in life, even when we may face another difficulty, knowing that we might be okay, right? It's a hard skill to build for those that grew up.
Particularly in play therapy, if you're doing level 3 digital play therapy, which is you as the therapist and the client meeting together and playing within whatever the game is on whatever platform together, is that then they're also learning they don't have to do it alone, or that the workload is shared, that people have different skills, how to ask for help.
Yes.
Asking for help is something that is so difficult for so many people.
Yeah.
So there are so many levels and layers to using these tools. And a lot of times, like, I think I want to provide these higher level deep dive trainings and whatnot, because those are the things I get super excited about, is talking about exactly what you're talking about right now, is all these levels to it. But a lot of people aren't quite ready for that yet. You know, they're just getting into it.
I'll be there. Sign me up.
So, but that to me, like, even when you're talking about executive functioning and thinking about, okay, what are the things that even comprise executive functioning in the first place? Right. How does that show up in anyone of any age, but particularly in children? How does it show up for them? How does it show up if they have any differences, learning differences, any of that kind of stuff? How does it show up when they're in an environment that they have a high motivation to be in?
Yeah.
Is it that certain areas they avoid because it's too frustrating or too difficult? Is it that because of something in the environment, it has allowed them to either compensate or to feel safe and to move forward, or whatever it might be? To me, that's our job as a therapist, to figure out where is it working, where is it not working, and what are the environmental components that are allowing that to happen, and what part of that can we be with them or assist them or guide them or witness or whatever it might be along the way. And it's
how often do we shut down that process by saying no games, no no electronics? You know, because we shut them down before we're even started and earning that safety with them, right? By shutting out the pieces of who they are and what's so important to them that they long to share with us.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was responding to what Play Geek was saying, where she was saying, you know, I've had clients who are unable to talk about the feelings and would shut down when we're playing games. It would just naturally come out. And, you know, I responded to her because I've done this a lot, you know, with families and stuff, that I feel it's easier to go from the digital to the physical, you know, rather than the other way around. And it speaks to what you're saying, where it's, we can use the digital environment and the, you know, the third person essentially to be able to build the safety. And, you know, I can even speak to, you know, sometimes having frustrations with, you know, my own family, so to speak. And sometimes we rupture that relationship and we don't talk for a while, but then it's, when we get together, it's, you know, let's sit here and play something together. And as we start to play something, we build that safety and, you know, being there for one another. You know, if, you know, my brother's struggling and I help him in the game and vice versa, that stuff carries over to other conversations. You know, like then you might text and say, hey, I'm having a hard time, can I talk to you for a minute? You know, it's, I always find it's a lot easier to start there than it is to you know, do the other way around.
Well, and sometimes I wonder if we wind up with a lot of people in the digital tools therapy world that come from a sandbox background, right? Virtual sandbox creator that you are, Jess. Just because, I mean, not only are some games literally called a sandbox type game, but the game is the sandbox. It's the container for what they're exploring, right? And we get to join them in there. They're inviting us in. It's rare that I've had a kiddo want to play something by themselves and not have me join them in some way, shape, or form, right? They're inviting us into the space where they're putting all their stuff. And if we can view it as that sandbox, not just as the type of game, but also as that therapeutic sandbox that's so readily accepted in our therapy world, right? It's the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite, like, and my whole family built a lot of close relationships over this when I first started jumping into, the MMORPG. Jess and I always
Yeah.
say it, but, massive multi
Mm-hmm.
online role playing game.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the, most common ones that I think people, even if they've never played it, they've heard of it, but World of Warcraft. But EverQuest for me is one of the biggest sandbox games ever. And the idea that you have it has different continents, and you start out, you choose your race, like a dwarf or an ogre, a gnome, an elf, wherever, and you're on different
Mm-hmm.
continents. And the idea is you're playing with other people, and your goal is to explore other dungeons, but everyone can get to the max level in whatever way they choose, and they can choose whatever occupation or profession they want to be. And there's no maximum specific way to be able to do it. You choose your own pace, what route you want to go, what you want to start as, and like the similarities, you know,
Right.
between life and that in itself is, I think what you're saying is so perfect when you're talking
Absolutely.
about a sandbox.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that I also see it as, I think that's sometimes how we start to find people trickle into the digital play world is through Minecraft too, right? Because it's
Yes.
one of the biggest sandbox places that even schools are now accepting as being an appropriate place to learn and grow, right? And so now that I think people are seeing schools be more accepting, then maybe
Right.
they're kind of opening up to it. But there's so much more that's acceptable than Minecraft, as awesome as it is.
Oh, oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that is both overwhelming and wonderful about this is that there are so many different games available.
Mhm.
There are key categories, but
Mhm.
then when you look under those categories, there are differences, different ways
Mhm.
to approach,
Right.
different types of gameplay,
Yeah.
certainly different, excuse me, hardware availability and
Mhm.
whatnot. Speaking of which, little side thing, somebody I know has a Steam Deck, and
Mhm.
so Steam Deck, if somebody doesn't know,
It's a
similar,
manual, right?
right?
Or
It's similar
handheld.
to like a Switch, but it's a handheld
Yeah.
console for Steam, which
Yeah.
I'm going to DC for a business meeting this weekend, and the person's going to be there, and I'm like, bring your Steam Deck because I want to check it out.
Yes.
I
Yes.
because a couple reasons, and the main one is that my computer is so full that I can't even run Steam anymore. I have so
Mhm.
much stuff on my computer; it's ridiculous, and so I have to like delete stuff in order to, like, if I want to play Don't
Mhm.
Starve Together, I have to delete things off my computer to even start up Steam and do it. So now I'm going to have just a unit just for it. I'm so
Mhm.
excited. And I'm going to put Gris on there and Don't Starve Together and
Mhm.
a couple other ones. My clients have
Mhm.
games that they play that there are so many pieces
Yeah.
that you're putting together to create something that
Yeah.
then does an action.
Yeah.
Uh, and those games are amazing too. So it's just so, if you can, people say, well, that's really overwhelming. My recommendation is that people identify the clinical components that are important, that you recognize within your theoretical foundation, that you typically, I mean, it's not a closed list, right?
Right.
It hopefully
Right.
will
Mhm.
evolve both for each client and then over time in your
Yeah.
work. But in general, to have a list of things that are important components, what games will activate that, what you're hoping will be brought forth in the sessions, whatnot. Of course, what the client's interested in and what they have, each of you have available to you. Um, if you can identify those core pieces, then when you're evaluating programs for use in therapy, it's going to be easier. If I say, oh, I'm really looking for something that will spark or give practice to or whatever it might be for nurturing,
Mhm.
then when I am evaluating different and new programs, I'm going to see, is
Mhm.
is that a component of here?
Yeah.
And it might be a component that comes along further in the play too. So sometimes I'll be playing something with somebody and I'll be like, oh, there's a whole nother element to this that just came up. It's like mid-game, not early game. So watching YouTube videos, playing the game yourself, having game nights, which just before this Twitch, I was thinking to myself, we really need to schedule a game night. It's been too long. I know I've been crazy busy. I don't know when we can do it, but I'm gonna put that out there that we definitely need to schedule one, because I think it not only helps therapists play further in the game, learn from each other, whatnot, but then it's fun and it's engaging. And just like the events that we had at the Association for Play Therapy conference, when we were all able to hang out and have some fun together, it fills our cups too, not just the work benefits, which are there as well. So
absolutely. And I can't mention those YouTube videos enough either that you said. Like, it is such a great way. If you don't know much about a game that a kid tells you that they like, it is such an easy and free way to go learn a little bit more about it, because there's 1,000,001 gamers who are posting on YouTube, but their streams or their lives or whatever, whether it was YouTube or from another system like Twitch can port to YouTube, right? And lots of kids do. And so, but I will tell you, like, I'm not sure I've ever needed to introduce Adopt Me from Roblox to any of my children with traumatic backgrounds that need some of that nurturing. They were drawn to the things that we need.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And that goes back, I mean, it goes back even further, but to me, you know, I champion Axon and again, back to being a strange kid, I read Dibs in Search of Self when I was 9. I was at a house. I know, so weird. No,
it's not. I love it.
But I was at a house and all the adults were hanging out and doing their adult time, and I was bored and I was the only kid, and they kind of sat me in front of a TV, and I looked on the shelf and there was this book with this little red-haired, little freckle-faced boy, and I was like, oh, what's that? And I started reading. I read the entire book that afternoon. I loved it. Just the idea of really listening, even though he wasn't speaking, he was communicating, right? So very much. And to be attended to in that way by this adult was so captivating to me, because I was the kid in front of the TV being left alone the entire day while the adults were doing. Nobody was attending to me, but look what was going on for this little boy, right? So Axine is somebody who I really, if someone listening to this hasn't read that book, hasn't looked into her work, please do. Like, I
was supposed to do a fantastic training on her play therapy one. Like, it was something like all the life lessons I learned from Virginia Axline, someone who'd actually worked under her at one point. And it got canceled, or no, it got switched to in person, I think. And it had been virtual and like across the country from me, but I was still looking forward to hearing that, because I've heard great things.
You should all contact them. Please make it virtual so that those of us who can't get there. So, yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah, it sounded wonderful. But
so we have a few minutes left. It goes by so fast. It's crazy.
I know, right?
But I'm wondering if there are some game gems and or examples of clinical use that you might want to share with our listeners before we have to go.
Sure. Well, you know, some of the ones that I've streamed in the past on Twitch, for a while, I streamed for about 1.5 years talking about what it's like to be an adult living in a complex trauma world, right? For some of us. And I would stream playing some games that I felt had some good underlying themes with that. Gris was one of my first ones that I thought was just beautiful. Another recent one that I recently did was Life is Strange. I did the True Colors one, which I'd been drawn to for a while. And ironically, I didn't realize it actually till I started the game that she had actually just aged out of the foster care system. So it's a lovely one for the aging out youth who are kind of looking for a place to belong. But how many other youth also are looking for a place to belong because of various difficulties in their families or whatever, that it would apply really well to. There's another one. It's Wild at Heart or Young at Heart? I can't remember, but it's very similar to Gris in the artistic form. But it's a story of a little girl whose father dies, and she's trying to find him again. Somehow she hears his voice calling to her, and she's going through this very imaginative fantasy world trying to find him. And I think it applies very well as well to potentially grief, especially for individuals who maybe lost a parent at a young age, but also for individuals who might be separated from a parent or trying to figure out who they are in the midst of this world that was almost defined by grief, right? I thought it was really beautiful too. But like I said earlier, in regards to neurodivergency, I literally believe every video game has strong executive functioning components. And I think that so many of them, but some of my favorites, I feel like are a bit influenced by the fact that I grew up in the 80s, right? Very Mario driven. I love Super Smash Brothers. I love anything Kirby. I love Mario Kart is a great way in with someone who maybe hasn't played as much, because who can't, just steer, right? It's a great way to start. Is it hard? Oh, I love Mario Kart.
I think Kirby is a great way of explaining how we wear different hats because of Kirby's ability to.
Kirby has so many ways you can apply it, like empath skills, also taking on others' emotions and what that feels like, the weight of that, and being able to take them back off.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, oh, there's so much to Kirby. Plus, he's just so cute. I love Kirby. He's one of my favorites. There's just so many ways in. Like, literally getting to know, one of the first activities that I do in play therapy with anyone, especially young adult and under, or if they're an older adult and they have a history of loving games or comics or anything like that, is tell me who you are through fandoms, and we'll do some kind of like genogram or eco map that utilizes their favorite fandoms, and it tells me so much about them. And there's just so many fandoms that have been turned into video games at some point. Like, there's literally Teen Titans games, there's Powerpuff Girls games, there's everything out there, and who doesn't love reconnecting with things from their childhood, even adults?
Zelda. Oh, absolutely.
Right. Zelda. Yes. Mm-hmm. Zelda's amazing.
The things that, I mean, my brain's going so many directions. One, I do want to say, I put the Wild at Heart information into the chat for the people who are with us now, but that's another one on Steam. So
good job finding it. Both of those are also available on the Nintendo Switch.
Yes, because that's there are multiple things that will be cross-platform. Yeah. So always, I always, me personally, I go to the website of the actual game, and usually they have across some portion of it, whether it's the bottom or middle, all the different platforms that they play on. So.
Yeah, I think Life is Strange is just PlayStation.
That a PlayStation I don't have. I have Xbox.
Well, I am learning that the other Life is Strange games, I guess there's been multiple of them, are all regarding individuals who've been through some kind of traumatic event, and kind of adjusting afterwards. So I would definitely, if there are other therapists out there checking this out who do utilize PlayStation, those are really great. I'd say for teen and above, usually.
It looks like they have other.
They do.
Other, they have an app
platforms
on the Apple Store and
awesome
on Google Play. So
fantastic. There you go. They're very RPG. Like, it is literally you're just playing out the story. It's not gaming like typically thought of. Not really. There's a little bit of problem solving. I was gonna say, we haven't talked about that either. Like, games, so many games involve problem solving, and problem solving is fantastic for kids who are struggling to believe that they can accomplish things, right? When they learn that they can figure things out.
So many of us, not just kids.
Absolutely. It's true. It's so true. It's so true. I use so much digital play therapy with so many of my adults.
Oh, absolutely.
It's wonderful.
And, I mean, Gen Z, millennials, like they were like You, I mean, not me, but
Gen X's even. We were when Mario and Sonic all came out. Like we started when it boomed. So we're following along. We still have our Game Boys.
So that's what I'm saying is that this isn't just the Gen Alphas coming up now, born in 2010 and later. There are a lot of people who speak this language, and we may not know it unless we ask the questions, or at least provide that this is an environment where they can bring a variety of different interests into, which brings us full circle back to the beginning of our conversation of being open to and accepting of whatever it is they bring to the table, what their interests are, and what that means to them.
Absolutely.
And I think so much of all of this boils down to that.
Absolutely. Meeting people right where they're at, right?
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you were here with us today. And I also want to say I love your sweatshirt. You know,
thanks, right?
You have to represent here. Woohoo.
Right? Yep.
And we have, I think, one last mention in the chat.
Stray is lovely.
It's, Ashley put it in and said it's about a cat who gets separated from his family and has to navigate a new world. He helps others along the way and receives help to get back to his world, and more to come as they expand that. So for adding that. So I always end with, we could keep going and going.
We could.
I really enjoy talking with you, and I thank you for all the information and insight that you shared with us today. And if you
thank you to both of you.
Thank you.
We'd love to have you come back at some point.
Yes,
absolutely. I'd love to. I'd love to.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. We'll see everybody in a month. In
all right.
Thanksgiving weekend. So we're going to take that one off. But in a month, it'll be Dr. Robert Jason Grant. And I'm going to ask him to listen to this one so that
he can build on it.
Exactly.
So cool. Thank you guys so much, and have a good Thanksgiving.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.